Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Caring for Your Mind and Money. Today we're going to be talking about the warning signs of Alzheimer's, and we're also going to talk about some warning signs that relate to finances. This webinar series is a partnership between the Alzheimer's Association Greater Michigan Chapter and Planning Alternatives, and we're really excited to put this series together to educate people and help them become more informed about important topics and really be equipped to navigate the aging process, navigate finances, and be better off. I'm Nathan Mercereau, President of Planning Alternatives, and I'm here with Lauren Sittner. She's from the Alzheimer's Association. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
This is the second webinar that we've done, and it's been a great response, and people have been appreciative of the feedback and content. Maybe tell a little bit about what you spend your time doing at the Alzheimer's Association.
Of course. So within the Alzheimer's Association, my role is to travel to counties within Metro Detroit, within the Metro Detroit area, and I educate either professional caregivers or family caregivers on how to provide the best possible care to their loved one.
It's great. Thank you for the work you're doing, and I know that really helps a lot of people, and it's a significant life stage issue that individuals and families are dealing with.
Sure.
So today we're going to be talking about 10 signs, and this is something that we all kind of wonder about when we either experience it personally or see family members, loved ones, other contacts struggling with some of these issues. I know since we've been talking about the whole topic of Alzheimer's, every time I misplace my keys, I think I've lost them, and I think, oh no, I'm on the path to the Alzheimer's destination, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. And we're going to be talking about the difference between myth and reality as some of the things that we think about. But how do you distinguish aging and the Alzheimer's issues that come up?
Right, absolutely. So with Alzheimer's disease, I want to make it very clear that Alzheimer's disease and typical aging are two very, very different things. So as we get older, you may hear an older person say, I have a little touch of dementia, or, oh, that's just a little bit of my dementia kicking in. When in reality, as we age, many of our physical capabilities diminish. Memory is thought to be one of those capabilities, but having a harder time remembering some things is very different from Alzheimer's disease.
That's a great point. So this disease, or the term gets used a lot. What is behind it? What is Alzheimer's disease?
Absolutely. So Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease of the brain that destroys brain cells, causing problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. In the early stages of Alzheimer's, the affected person may experience memory impairment, lapses of judgment, and personality. As the disorder progresses, new areas of the brain are affected. Memory and language problems worsen, as do movement and perception. They may be disoriented and see personality changes.
That's certainly a heavy issue. What are some of the risk areas that you're seeing?
Of course, the major risk factor is age. Along with that, we tend to see that women tend to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's more than men do. However, the only real reason behind this is due to the fact that women tend to live longer than men do.
Okay. And that's certainly a trend that we see continuing as people are eating healthier, having more exercise.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we're all going to be living longer, but what that also means is that this may become more of an issue for more people.
And that kind of takes me into having our brain and body connected. So brain health comes from a healthy body and an active social life. There is a very strong link between a serious head injury, such as a traumatic brain injury, and a risk for dementia. Also, diabetes in midlife can lead to Alzheimer's disease decades later. So it is very important for our health to have a healthy body, be social, keep that social engagement up, as well as eating healthy, exercising regularly, things like that.
We talked in our last webinar about the importance of cardiovascular exercise and how we can take care of our body, and when we do that, it takes care of our brain. And sometimes we overlook that simple fact.
Absolutely.
So there are some warning signs that we're going to be talking about to consider as people enter this stage of the disease.
Right. So memory changes that disrupt daily life. So forgetting something recently learned, or asking the same information over and over. And really, this is because with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, as the disease progresses, the person is no longer able to create a new memory. So something that's recently learned, or perhaps asking when's dinner over and over again, that's really due to the fact that, as I said, new memories are unable to be made. Along with that, relying on memory aids or family members for things that you used to handle alone. So this could be things such as driving, maybe scheduling doctor's appointments, even things like your financial matters.
Let's look at number 2.
So challenges in planning or problem solving, problems developing or following a plan, maybe that's, following directions, things like that. Problems working with numbers. We tend to see a lot of people who maybe have a data entry job, and that's been their career for years, and all of a sudden they're unable to complete those tasks as they once were. Problems following a familiar recipe. So this could be, maybe someone has made the same cake or pie for years and years, and they're no longer able to complete this with ease as they once did. Difficulty keeping track of bills. This is really important for family to get involved because financial issues are so important, and this does tend to become a problem.
We're going to be talking about that later because as financial advisors, we see clients in how they view their money, and we'll start to notice some slippage perhaps in how they're looking at things currently compared with how they used to.
Right, absolutely. We also see some challenges with concentration, unable to maybe sit for an entire TV show or watch a movie that they once loved. Taking longer than before to do common tasks. So, possibly making a bed can take much longer than it ever used to.
How about number 3?
So difficulty completing tasks. So completing those daily tasks, as I said, making a bed, maybe daily grooming, trouble driving to once familiar places can become hard. Maybe remembering where your own home is after you drive to these familiar places and unable to get back. Problems managing a budget at work, and then difficulty remembering rules of a favorite game or maybe an activity that you used to do quite a bit. And we have trouble following these rules and completing these familiar tasks.
When we think about Alzheimer's, it's easy to consider that it only affects people at later stages of life, but the reality is that it could affect people at a much younger stage. Is there any age range that you've seen people that would be considered maybe an earlier stage diagnosis?
Absolutely. So we consider our early onset to be 65 years of age or younger. So that's anyone, before the age of 65 that does have a significant diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia.
And there can be a number of people in that age range.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look at number 4.
So confusion with time or place, losing track of dates, seasons, or passage of time. This can be seen, maybe you have a visitor come over and spend a significant amount of time with you and they leave, and then you can't remember if they were just there, how long they were there for. And this kind of goes along with forgetting where one is or how they got there. So perhaps, going to the mall, spending some time there, and then you walk out to get into your car, but you can't remember whether you drove yourself there or maybe you took a cab. These are all very important early detection signs.
And that must be very frustrating to the person that is experiencing these, because probably they're feeling lost or frustrated, and it's also a challenge for family members when they see these things happening.
Very, very frustrating, absolutely. And as family members, our biggest concern is we want them to be safe. But we also have to think about how scared they must be in that moment as well.
Look at warning sign number 5.
So trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So we may see a difficulty reading, trouble judging distance, which really is a factor when it comes to driving, and then problems determining color and contrast, which also can be an issue when it comes to driving. Deciphering the color of the stoplights and when to go and when to stop, things like that can definitely become an issue and definitely are involved in these spatial and visual relationships.
And when family members notice the driving issue, is that a tough conversation to have with a parent or a loved one? Because that really represents independence for the person.
That is absolutely, it's a very, very tough conversation for family members to have with their loved one. There are ways at the Alzheimer's Association we can help you with that conversation, but the main thing to know is when you take perhaps mom or dad's keys away, you have to provide them with other options. So whether it's you're going to be that person that's going to take them where they need to go, or you're going to have someone there for them that's going to take them where they need to go. You can't just cut them off.
That's a great point. What about warning sign number 6?
So problems with words in speaking or writing. So problems following or joining in a conversation can be very hard. We tend to see, perhaps mom or dad or your husband or wife used to go to lunch once a month with a group of friends, and you see them not going anymore. A point that I want to make out is perhaps they're not going because they don't know how to join in that conversation, and that takes me to a difficulty tracking conversation. So maybe stopping in the middle or unable to continue with the conversation. And then, as I said at the very beginning, with this disease, we're unable to create new memories, and then we see repeating what has already been said, which can be very embarrassing for that person, especially if maybe their family members or friends aren't aware of what's going on.
When those conversations happen and the person's trying to process something, communicate an idea, and they're stuck on a word or they're searching for a word, it's human nature, I think, to want to fill that word in for them. Is that a good thing to do, or what's your view on that?
Absolutely, like you said, it is definitely common nature to sort of jump in and help them out, and we think we are making them feel less embarrassed by doing that. However, with Alzheimer's disease, it's really important for us as family members or caregivers. With this disease, we tend to look at what that person is losing, all of their deficits. But if that person is still able to have a conversation, we want to highlight that. We don't want to sort of take over the conversation for them. So let them finish. Let them get their words out at a pace that feels comfortable to them. And really, we need to have patience and let them have the conversation themselves.
Good insight. Let's look at number 7.
All right. So misplacing and losing the ability to retrace steps. So,
they're my keys.
As you said, yes, your keys, putting things in unusual places. So here's an example of a wallet in a fruit bowl. A personal example, my grandfather would put the remote control in the freezer. And this was kind of when we started to notice some signs that he was exhibiting that then led to his diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease.
So he would just start to put the remote in the freezer?
Absolutely.
And that made sense to him?
That's where he felt it went, and as his family, we had to go with it. So having increased difficulty retracing steps to locate a missing item. So as you said, you lose your keys, but you have that ability to go back and figure out where you last left them. With Alzheimer's disease, you don't have that ability any longer to retrace those steps. And this is definitely a warning sign. And then accusing others of stealing. We see this quite often at the association, just because, you know, it's a lot easier to blame someone else rather than putting the blame on yourself and saying, you know, I lost it, I don't know where it is. So accusing someone else tends to be quite a bit easier for the person with the diagnosis.
But that also creates some stressful situations, some pretty challenging conversations, I can imagine.
It sure does, especially when the person with the diagnosis is accusing other family members.
What about number 8?
So a decreased or poor judgment. So changes in decision-making and judgment. We tend to see a lot of poor judgment with money, especially when it comes to giving large amounts to telemarketers, spending money more impulsively, and wearing clothing inappropriate to weather or season. So I want to really touch on giving large amounts to telemarketers. You know, this is very hard, especially for our older adults, but it's really important to make sure that as family members, as caregivers, we know what's going on so we can really help them, and so that things like this don't become a threat to them.
One thing that we've seen a few cases of is people having a habit of paying their bills as they come in, but maybe telemarketers or charities sometimes will send a little envelope with a check here box for a $25 or $50 donation, and the person thinks it's a bill, and they write the check out, and another one comes the following month, and it can be a way that finances get redirected unintentionally.
Right, absolutely.
Something to be aware of.
Yes, definitely something to be aware of.
What about sign number 9?
So withdrawal from work or social activities. So, you know, withdrawing from hobbies or work projects, maybe even family gatherings. Because as I said, this person maybe is embarrassed, they don't know how to interact any longer. Losing track of a favorite sports team. You know, causes for this are as simple as maybe the person with the diagnosis does not remember that their favorite sports team is on, or going back to concentration, maybe they're unable to focus on that game for that specific amount of time. Maybe they just are actually follow what's happening. And then forgetting how to engage in a favorite hobby. Maybe this is something that, you know, you've done for a long time, and now you just don't know how to actually engage, how to get it started. Maybe you can get it started, but halfway through you lose interest. And then avoiding those social situations. So going back to, you know, having that lunch once a month with a group of friends, you're unable to really be social, to engage in those conversations. You don't know how to act. Maybe you feel embarrassed, which can also lead to a lot of anxiety as well.
And that has to be a challenge when someone who has been social starts to withdraw, and you know it's not really them, that they would love to go to a party, but now they want to avoid people more than contact.
Absolutely, it is. It's very tough.
Is our final sign, number 10.
So our final sign is changes in mood and personality. So increasingly displaying signs of confusion, suspicion, which, you know, as we said, accusing someone of stealing something, being very fearful. You know, as I said about, you know, maybe our loved one, our biggest concern is their safety, but we have to think about how scared they may be in that moment as well. They are unclear as to what's going on to them, what's happening with them, which can, of course, lead to anxiety, being very, very fearful and very scared of what's going to happen, where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to say, and agitation as well.
Is there a general tip or a general approach of dealing with someone when they're going through that really mental anguish of being confused or having all these emotions? It's going to be a really challenging time to communicate with them.
It is, and it's very challenging, but as either a loved one or a caregiver, it's so important to let them have these emotions. It's okay to feel all of these things listed here. What they're going through is something that we're unable to understand.
But it's very real to them.
It's very real to them. So letting them display each of these emotions is very, very important.
Good advice. So we're going to chat about diagnosis and the importance of getting an early diagnosis. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering when they see these signs, what's next? What do you typically tell people?
Absolutely. So of course a diagnosis earlier is better. And the next step is getting a thorough assessment from a doctor. The diagnosis may not be Alzheimer's at all. It may be a completely different diagnosis. But no matter what the diagnosis turns out to be, early diagnosis is critical.
Yeah, well, there's some myths and reality,
yeah.
And it's interesting because I think I've heard you say that just because you see some of these signs doesn't automatically mean Alzheimer's is in play.
Absolutely, and so many times I get family members or the person themselves say, what is the point for getting diagnosed? You know, it's not curable, there's no treatment, it's just going to upset everyone and upset myself, so why do it? But the reality is that an early diagnosis is the only way to get treatment for any diagnosis.
That's a great point. And we had talked about how other things may be in play. What's the perspective on that?
Right, absolutely. So once the person with symptoms sees the doctor, they often discover that they actually don't have dementia at all, but they have another illness. Some of the illnesses that can cause memory problems are treatable and can be reversed, like depression or thyroid issues. Other illnesses that can cause memory problems can be life-threatening if not detected and treated promptly, like a heart problem or high blood pressure that can cause mini strokes. These need to be diagnosed and treated right away to avoid even more serious damage. It's important not to ignore changes or to assume that it is Alzheimer's disease.
Great perspective. So it's important to work with the right people, the right professionals,
Absolutely.
And to take your time going through this process too.
Because, you know, even though there is no cure, there is really no treatment, there are ways to improve your quality of life. And with an early diagnosis, you can get the maximum benefit from available treatments. You can explore treatments that may provide some relief of symptoms and help you maintain your independence. You may also increase your chances of participating in clinical trials that offer high standards of care and also help advance research.
Yeah, so the sooner the better, and I'm sure a lot of people want to avoid this topic, but leaning into it and beginning the investigation and education process is really critical.
Absolutely.
So if I see someone has the 10 signs, what's next?
Absolutely. So if you see someone, or maybe it's you yourself and you think you are exhibiting some of these signs, it's really important to talk to people about what you're seeing or maybe feeling. Visiting your doctor is so very important. You know, we want to make sure we're ruling out any other medical issues before we get that diagnosis. We want to make sure that anything else can be treated. And then getting the right treatment as soon as possible is crucial.
Well, the Alzheimer's Association provides a number of resources, and today is one of them, as you're providing education on this topic. What are some other areas that you'd like to point out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our support groups, and we have a variety of support groups within each county. We have support groups for the person with the diagnosis themselves, for the person and their spouse, and we have support groups that are specifically for caregivers. We also have our day program. We have one located in Southfield, and we have one located in Detroit. This is for a person with a diagnosis to come in and, you know, spend the day engaged and involved in certain activities. And then our education and training. You know, we're able to go out into the community and educate, as I said at the beginning, either care staff or personal family that are caring for a loved one on how to provide the best possible care. And as you can see, there are many other ways that we can help. And more of this information by visiting our alz.org/GMC website or by calling our 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week Harry L. Nelson helpline.
Oh, that's great. And GMC, what that stand for?
That's for our Greater Michigan chapter.
So that's the local Michigan, local to Detroit chapter that's focused on providing these resources. That's great. I know that the Alzheimer's Association has a clear mission, a clear vision. A lot of work is being done in the research area, and there's also a lot of practical things that are going on to help individuals and families deal with this.
There sure are. So, you know, some of our informal resources for support include family, friends, neighbors, your employer, your physician, perhaps your church. And it's important to let others know specific ways in which they can help and be supportive to you. We also have, you know, home-delivered meals, helping with yard work, coming to sit with the person with dementia, maybe while you do errands, pick up groceries or medication for you as well.
That's great. That's life goes on, and we need to take things a day at a time, and the support that you folks provide is significant, and I want to express appreciation for that. Well, I'm going to chat about a few things from a financial health perspective and use the format of myths and realities to comment on a few items. And these items may affect people in late stage of life or aging process, but they also may be for other family members to be aware of as well as they see a loved one going through different things with their finances. And you had mentioned, Lauren, before the importance of tuning into judgment around finances and how sometimes that judgment gets impaired. And we've seen that in the past with clients, and as advisors sometimes we're the first people to see that from a financial perspective because we know what the ongoing conversation has been. But have you seen people where they're saying, hey, I'm private, so you know, I don't need any help from anyone, and that's got to be a certain mindset?
Absolutely. You know, we see this all the time, especially with those highly independent people that never had to rely on anyone for anything, and now they're needing that extra help, but they want to still be that private person, and they don't want people to know about their finances or those private matters.
Right. And finances are very private, and people work hard to accumulate what they have, and they want to protect it. But if they are focused on total secrecy, that can really be costly. It could be a bill payment gets missed, things just start to fall through the cracks, and whether it's during you know, a stage of life where there's a challenge, people that love that person want to know how to help, and it's hard to do it when you're in the dark.
It is, absolutely.
So a tip that we suggest as a to-do is start a conversation with a trustworthy contact, and that doesn't mean that you're disclosing every single piece of information about your finances, but it does mean that you identify people that are close to you, that you know you can trust, that will look out for your best interest, and I'm sure that you see that you know, within the family setting as well.
Quite a bit, and you know, it can be something as simple as just maybe looking to a son or daughter and saying, hey, can you just check over my bills once a month, make sure I'm hitting everything, make sure I'm doing everything correctly.
One tool that we've created to help individuals and families is a financial empowerment workbook. And it covers a lot of things, and it's to help people get organized about their financial affairs and status. And that can be cash flow, it could be where the assets are held, it could be a lot of things. And a simple or a great place to start is on where your important documents are located. Like I said, you don't have to disclose every single thing about what's in the document, but first of all, knowing where they are, and this is a page from the workbook, and it lists a number of important documents, and over here under these numbers, you would just place a check where it's located, and on another page of the workbook, there's a legend that you create that would say number 1 is X, it's my safety deposit box, or number 2 is it's in the file cabinet in my office, or number 3 is another location, and you define where you start to keep these records and go through this list and just put a check mark where they're located. And it's really helpful, first of all, for you to get things in order, but when you're communicating with others, this can be a natural first step to begin the conversation. Myth number 2 is around cybersecurity, and the world that we're in is more and more online. We're filling out forms, we're sharing information online, and that's something that is a risk factor. And I don't know if you've thought about the cybersecurity even from your perspective, but
you know, it sure is a risk factor, and especially with the aging process, with older adults, it's really important to make sure that we are wary about some of these things that we see on the internet. You know, maybe it looks like a great deal or whatever the case may be, but it is important to make sure that, you know, we are smart about the choices that we're making.
Yeah, absolutely. So each of us has a profile, and there are people called hackers that are working full-time. They've got jobs, but on the wrong side of the fence of not doing good at all. But they spend their time trying to get your identity. And I've personally had my identity stolen, and that was 2 years ago, and there's been a number of consequences that I've had to face and challenges. So we really encourage people to watch out, be alert for scams. Don't share your personal information online, or just do it in a limited way or in a secure setting. And there's a number of things that define what's a secure setting. In the workbook that I mentioned, we provide a cybersecurity checklist, and that's a tool that you can use just to make sure that you're protecting yourself the best that you can, because this is a real issue. And I will mention regarding this workbook that it's something that we will provide on a complimentary basis to anyone listening who would like to get a copy of the workbook and use it to organize their personal finances. And at the end of the webinar, you will receive a survey, and on that survey you can indicate that you're interested in receiving the workbook and complete your information where we can send that to you. And this will be a great tool that you can start using, and we've had great feedback from people that have already used it. Now, the other things that we're going to talk about briefly relate to retirement accounts, life insurance, and estate planning. And these are important topics, and everyone has different needs and different life situations. But there's some things that relate to using your money, and specifically when it comes to retirement accounts, some people think, well, it doesn't really matter where I take money from my retirement accounts. And think of taking money from your retirement accounts as turning on a faucet to receive your monthly, quarterly, annual distributions. And you know, it does matter because you don't want to have a leaky faucet. You don't want to lose the hard-earned money that you worked to accumulate, the nest egg that you built, and you don't want to be in a place where you're selling things, especially within a diversified portfolio, that may not make sense. So we have a sophisticated withdrawal strategy that we use for clients, but the main thing is to make sure that you're talking to your financial planner about how do I take money in the most efficient and the smartest way out of my accounts, because different tax implications may be realized, different investment implications may be realized as well. So make sure that's a to-do that you follow up on. Myth number 4 is life insurance. And a lot of people think, well, I have life insurance, so my family's fine. And I believe as you're communicating with family members, the topic of money will come up oftentimes as you're providing counsel.
It sure does. And you know, as
it's a hot topic too.
It is. And as I said earlier, with the aging process, specifically with Alzheimer's disease, as I've stated, it's a progressive disease, so it takes away things from us. But while that person still has certain abilities, we want to make sure that we highlight those abilities. So when it comes to making some of these financial decisions, it's really important to have them involved right away, and get these changes done, any paperwork that needs to be done, making sure that these personal and very important information gets completed right away.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oftentimes it makes sense to get a second opinion. You might think things are okay, but with a second opinion from a professional that is looking at things objectively, some things might turn up. And we've found cases where with life insurance, because there's many types of policies, someone may have what they consider a permanent policy, and a permanent policy is designed to have cash value that is in the account, and that cash is there for the rest of your life, so that when you die, that will pay out the life insurance death benefit. But the reality is that some of these quote-unquote permanent policies aren't permanent because there isn't sufficient cash. So one of the to-dos that we recommend is to request an in-force ledger from your insurance company. And I know in-force ledger is a technical term, but that's literally what they would complete, and what that does is look at the existing policy and give a forecast of making sure that cash is okay, or seeing how long that cash would last to keep the policy in place, and make sure that you seek the counsel from a professional that knows what they're doing with these types of products and policies. Final myth we're going to talk about is a trust, and people get their estate in order and they'll create a trust, which is a set of instructions of what is supposed to happen after you die, and who gets the money, how it gets distributed, what are the conditions, and who's in charge of things after you pass. It's a really important document, and many people will come into the office and they have this big thick binder of all these things, and they say, this is my trust, I'm all set. But the reality is signing your trust is not enough. You have to fund it, and funding means attaching your assets or any resources that you have to the trust. So if you have a investment account or a brokerage account, for example, and it's in your name or jointly held with someone else, you need to retitle that so that the trust now owns that account. And by doing that, you're actually funding the trust. You're getting the assets attached to the document, and upon your death, the assets that are owned by the trust, or that the trust is the direct beneficiary of assets, like a life insurance policy, that's how the dollars get to the trust and the trust works. So we've seen too many cases where people have done the hard work and they've paid for this trust, but it's not funded. And looking to retitle your assets and review and update your beneficiary designations will help you fund things. So that's the side of the financial perspective with dealing with the aging process. And we've got Q&A. And if you had submitted any questions, we can review those. So a couple of questions came in. So Lauren, I'll ask you, as it relates to family members that are seeing potential signs, and the instinct might be, hey, let's rush mom or dad or loved one to the latest workshop and kind of make sure they're aware of everything. But we talked about before, you want to give that person some independence. How do you, what's the most common counsel or advice that you give people, especially on the family member side, in helping someone going through this and entering this stage? Right.
So, as I said before, we want to make sure that we can rule everything else out. So if we are seeing some of these signs or symptoms, going to the doctor, making sure nothing else is going on. And then if in fact the diagnosis is Alzheimer's disease or a specific type of dementia, yes, absolutely. Go to those education classes, go to those seminars, become part of a support group. There are so many ways that we can help you through this process, and it really is important to get involved. And as I said before, really gain education about the disease, about what that person is going through.
That's great advice. Another question relates to finances, and it relates to retirement accounts. So people have often save money into retirement plans like employer plans or IRAs, and what do you do with the estate titling on that or trust titling? Well, retirement accounts have to stay titled as retirement accounts, otherwise they lose their tax deferred status or any tax benefits. So first of all, make sure you're working with a trusted and competent attorney to get good advice on what to do with those accounts. Oftentimes they're listed as primary or secondary beneficiaries. But the other thing that's important to talk about is whether there's a specific trust needed for retirement accounts. There's some unique things from a tax planning standpoint that trust work with the proper type of trust can really help maximize the benefit of those hard-earned assets that you've accumulated in those retirement accounts. So that's a topic to cover with an attorney as well. And we also talk to our clients and anyone interested in our services about the options that they have. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage you to check out our workbook. And this is really a great step toward getting your personal finances in order and to use things like the document locator, make sure the cybersecurity checklist is followed, and make sure that you're up to speed on the things that are important to you with your finances. We also want to share that we've got another webinar coming up next month, and it's life stage planning. It's really talking about the aging process and with various issues that come up, what are some of the programs, services, and strategies to consider, and that might be for yourself or a loved one to tune into. We have recorded this webinar, and we will post that on our website, planningalt, planniningalt.com, within the next day or two. So we encourage you to register for the next webinar. Registration is already open, and we look forward to seeing you and happy to continue the conversation. So Lauren, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Great content, and thanks for all the work you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.